First, let me just have a sip of my tea. I'm having a ginger lemon tea, which is like my favorite tea. I also feel like in some ways, like my voice has just been like croaky, like permanently for like the last month or something like that. So excuse that. But Australia Fashion Week. So I basically realized that this year that this was like my 5th fashion week, which is so crazy. But yeah, I've been going like since my first Australia Fashion Week was back in 2021. And that was like kind of like during COVID times. And I had come here and I remember just like feeling this like excitement. And I've like been involved in other fashion weeks. Like when I was in uni, I would volunteer at the Mercedes-Benz like fashion festival in Brisbane, and that was where I met one of my like best friends, like when we were 18 and like fresh 18-year-olds, and just kind of like I remember standing at the broom gates with her, my friend Haley, and us being like, oh my god, I love fashion, like I'm gonna do fashion, like it's fashion is my passion. That was literally the conversation. And now Haley is like living overseas styling, and then obviously I went into like, you know, what I do, so we weren't lying. But anyways, I remember coming to Sydney in 2021 and just feeling so excited because like I feel like in the Australian space that Sydney is definitely like the like fashion capital, I would say, although some would argue that like Melbourne is kind of has like a better style scene. I feel like every time I go to Melbourne recently it's just been like the best time, but I definitely feel like Melbourne people are just so cool in their style, but it also feels like way more kind of like a little bit more like grunge and like I don't know, like young, rebellious, compared to like I think Sydney is definitely has like more of the commercial brands that do well, and they kind of start in Sydney and then they end up going overseas. Anyways, in 2021, I feel like there was so much attention on Australia Fashion Week because I can't quite remember, but I feel like some of the overseas shows weren't really like fully going along to full capacity because of like COVID. So I remember that year there was like a lot of coverage, and me just being like so new to the scene, I think I was just kind of like soaking everything up and I think at that point I was even unsure like what shows I was going to get invited to. And back then, because it was, I can't remember who the sponsor was, but there was like an official sponsor and people could actually buy tickets. And now my understanding, because I only really started going to Australia Fashion Week, you know, 5 years ago, that previously I don't think that it was or like back in its heyday of like Sydney Fashion Week, Australia Fashion Week, back in its heyday, that I don't think that people could buy tickets, and so it was kind of like exclusive. And I feel like when I wasn't involved like actually attending shows in Australia Fashion Week, I lived for like all the coverage like online, and that would be like the articles and stuff. And I remember back in the day seeing like Bella Hadid, and she was still pretty big then. I feel like it was maybe 2016 or 2017 when she came to Australia, and she walked for like Misha Collection or something like that, and it was like such a huge deal. I think not. Did Gigi ever come? I'm not too sure, but I feel like there used to be like the week or kind of whole thing in general had budget to be able to like fly people internationally to kind of give it that like celebrity sort of, you know, thing. Whereas obviously now it's kind of like it just doesn't have the same money. But anyways, so 2021 when I went, I feel like I had so much fun, but it was also because like I just hadn't been before. I felt like a little fish in a big pond. And then over the years, I definitely have tried like just kind of like working my way up in terms of like creating those relationships with like brands, with PR agencies. And definitely like my first year, I went to a few shows, but like the shows that I really wanted to go to at that time. Like, I just didn't have the relationship with like the brands or the agencies, and so like, you know, just didn't happen. I feel like the busiest year that I had where I kind of like went full force was like 2023. And like I think I just, in terms of like doing socials, obviously I can only really speak in terms of like my full experience, but in terms of doing socials, Fashion Week is a way for you to connect with brands and also to be able to kind of like bring your followers along and also show like your personal style. So you go to all these different shows, and you, in some ways, I try to kind of like dress a little bit in the world of that brand, you know, like if I'm going for a brand that's like, I don't know, something that's like super glam or so, or a brand that does like very like glam things, I'm probably going to be in that world, not necessarily going to change the way I dress, but it's going to be my take on glam. And so kind of when you do Fashion Week, the whole thing is to like obviously you as the influencer I can't speak. You as the influencer is going to the brand's show to hopefully give them more of an audience to see like what this brand is doing, what their collection is, or even to discover who they are. And then in turn, when it comes to you, you're like leveraging like that brand to show to your followers like, hey, maybe I'm like elevated, or like, hey, I'm connected to these like specific people, which hopefully can like show other brands kind of like your style, like the potential sort of like I don't know, content that you can do. So if you actually really hustle and you like get cool looks and you just kind of like focus as an influencer, Fashion Week is like really beneficial. And even sometimes like if you don't get shows, like you can still just go be around and like create really cool content, you know what I mean, to kind of like support that. So yeah, I hope that kind of like explains in terms of like the benefits of like having people who work in the social media space. And then also being in the modeling space, that Fashion Week also works as a way for models to be able to like be introduced to like new brands by working with them. And if you do walk in the show, that a lot of the times, you know, if the brand in the future is like shooting a campaign or just doing things in the future, they'll hopefully remember you, or they'll be like, oh, this girl walked in the show. And then it's also a thing of like publicity, because then other brands see you walking in the show and hopefully are like, oh my God, who's that? And then you also get like coverage in terms of like your face might be like in magazines, because it's just, I feel like I'm kind of like chopping and changing, but like whatever, let's just go with it. But what is so funny about Fashion Week as a model is that like so basically you usually get there like 5 hours honestly before the show, and a lot of the times, TBH, I feel like you like obviously you get there on time because it's like, but a lot of the times you're literally sitting there for like an hour or two doing nothing. But it's also fine because that's when you get to meet other girls and boys, and you're able to like just like chat and like really connect. And I feel like in modeling there's more of a space to kind of like create like community, because a lot of you are going through the same thing in terms of like, you know, say 2 weeks or a week before like Fashion Week actually happens, you're kind of like running to all these like shows, all these different clients, going to the castings if they've requested you, and then you kind of like wait to hear if you've been put on hold. And then if you've been put on hold, sorry, I feel like I'm talking so fast. And then if you get put on hold, you then will go in for a fitting, and just because you go in for a fitting doesn't mean that you actually have the show. And sometimes the brand might get you in for like 2 fittings or just 1 fitting, and then probably like the day before the show or like 2 days before the show, then you might get a confirmation. And then I've even heard from like other friends that when it comes to the overseas market is sometimes you get confirmed for the show, you go, and unless you actually get on that catwalk, it's not even confirmed that you're actually going to walk. So I feel like being on both sides of like doing socials and being able to go as like a guest of a brand or, you know, a guest of a company that is able to like send someone to like the show to then get you to post, compared to like doing modeling. It's like, I feel like when you're on the influencing side, you get treated so much better, because obviously the brands are coming to you because of your personality. And I feel like when it comes to modeling, that a lot of the times you just have to go through so much of like the thick of it. And like in some ways, I think that like with modeling, sometimes it feels like until you like really make it or like make an impression on a brand, that a lot of the times it can feel like you're just like another number, and there's just so much uncertainty, you know. I feel like when it comes to modeling, it feels like there's so much more uncertainty, because literally it's not till like the day before the show or 2 days before the show that you even know if you're like walking. And so in some ways that really bonds us girls. And so when you see another girl and they just kind of explain like, oh, I'm on hold for something, it's like they don't even have to say anything. Like there's just this overall consensus that everyone just kind of like knows like how they're feeling. Okay, but I wanted to touch base on, I feel like on socials, like there was a lot of discourse about Australia Fashion Week this year. So basically, over the previous years, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was Afterpay that was sponsoring Australia Fashion Week from like 2021 or 2022. I'm not too sure. Like they were the official sponsors. And so therefore the whole week itself just became a lot more like commercial. But then also in saying that, it's like when it comes to things like this, it's really expensive. The production that goes into it, I'm always so blown away by all the shows that I go and see. Like in Sydney, so the main venue is Carriage Works. And then from that, you'll have different brands who may have an offsite show, which sometimes is really cool having an offsite show, but then also other times it can be a bit hard, because if, say for example, you've got like 4 shows in the day and then like 2 of those brands are doing offsite, it kind of feels like you're like a little bit like left, right and center. But sometimes it also feels, I guess because like Fashion Week has always kind of been done at Carriage Works, that sometimes it can kind of feel a bit like same. So I feel like as Australians, people get really excited when it's like offsite, that there's this like kind of level of like exclusivity or like just like a spark of creativity. And I also think for the brands that they're able to create more of a world. But anyways, I digress. But yeah, so the last few years Afterpay was the official sponsor, I'm pretty sure. If I'm wrong, then whatever. And then last year, Pandora was the official sponsor as well. So that also means that that brand is obviously at the forefront. Also, like, love those 2 brands. So it's like not that I'm shading or anything. I'm just kind of like saying what has been the case of the previous years. And then IMG was the official like organizers of Australia Fashion Week for, I don't even know, for like so many years. And then basically last year was, they decided to like pull out for like various reasons, because obviously it's so expensive. Like it's such an exciting year, and I will go onto this it's such an exciting week, and I will go on to like why I feel the benefits of this, but it's like incredibly expensive. It's like the staff, the, you know, set design, like there's just so much that goes into it. So anyways, IMG stopped being the official like organizers and, you know, company doing Australia Fashion Week. So then it was kind of like up in the air where people were like, is it still going to go on? Like, what's going to happen? And then basically, I think end of last year or it would have been end of last year. The Australian Fashion Council came along, and there was this whole meeting with all like different designers and kind of like people within the Australian fashion scene, like influential people within the Australian fashion scene coming together to be like, okay, we want this to happen. How can we do it? And so therefore, this year was like a bit of a different format. It meant that they kind of did less shows because, number one, they just didn't have as much time to be able to like bring all these like brands together. And also, I think, I'm just assuming, like financially as well. But they wanted the model to base the model of like Australia Fashion Week for it to feel more industry led in comparison to previous years where people have been able to like buy tickets. So obviously there is like the conversation of like who should actually be attending the shows. And I don't know if this is a bit controversial because of the discourse on TikTok. And I love that I'm like literally putting out this podcast when this episode like 2 weeks after everything even happened. But in some ways, I kind of think that it was good for them to be able to make it more industry led. And even me starting with like about the fact that I've been attending Australia Fashion Week since 2021 to just kind of give you insight in terms of, I think that sometimes people from the outside can see like influencers or like whoever attending all these shows, and it feels like you're only there because of like numbers. And even when I say that, I don't even have like that many followers, but it's not the case. Like this has been like 5 years of me literally attending this like, you know, week, creating relationships with the PR agencies, creating relationships with the brands. And obviously there are definitely like some brands that I actually don't really have a relationship with, but I may have a relationship with the PR, and then I'm able to get an invite. I just feel like by having more, like this year definitely felt different. It was less busier. That in previous years I was probably going to maybe like 3-4 shows a day or something like that, compared to like this year. The Monday I didn't go. The Tuesday I went to 3 shows. The Wednesday I went to 1 show. Thursday I went to 3 shows. And then Friday I walked 1 show, which was like pretty chilled to me. Even though I still felt like the same amount of tired afterwards. But what I found this year was that there was a lot more like community of like, I used the word community, but like there was more like events that felt like I was like connecting with like the fashion community here. So there was a Vogue eBay dinner. Obviously there's like a sponsor, but also it's like, who's going to pay for this? You know what I mean? And then there was something else I can't quite remember, but on the actual grounds at Carriage Works, you had to show like a pass to be able to even enter like the common area. And definitely when I was like walking around, it felt less lively compared to like previous years, just because there weren't as many people going. But I think that like by the Australian Fashion Council doing this, of making it more that like you have to have a reason to be there, even though I feel like I didn't have like or there wasn't as much discourse in terms of like, actually no, I take that back. It's not that there wasn't discourse about the brands themselves showing. There definitely was, but I feel like there could have been more. I saw this girl who I think she said that she, like on TikTok, I think she said that she was like part of the Australian Fashion Council, and she was saying, and she herself was a designer, and she was like, rather than people talking so much about who's attending the shows and like if these influencers are stylish, or kind of having these like videos trying to like catch people out, it kind of felt like this year that like the media or whatnot were trying to ask questions that were gonna like create that like buzz moment, or create that like like viral moment, rather than actually speaking about what Australian brands are showing and like what are they showing, why are they showing it. Like, let's talk more about that, which in turn uplifts the industry. But basically in this video, that's what the girl was saying. She was like, people need to talk more about the shows, even if they disliked it. It's like, let's get more of a conversation going about the actual designers, because also there's so much resources that goes into doing a show. I obviously am not a designer, and I've not worked behind the scenes in that capacity of like organizing like a show, but just from hearing and also seeing, there's so much that goes behind the scenes that it's like, let's actually redirect all of that like energy and like discourse about the brands and what is actually being put on the catwalks and what we're actually seeing. And I also have to note that like, I feel like so many, like, I don't know. Okay, like I can acknowledge that I'm in a privileged position in terms of like having these like relationships with brands and PR agencies, but also it's been like 5 years of me like putting in the work. But I feel like I saw a lot of videos of people being like, oh, like I came to Australia Fashion Week and I didn't get any shows. And it kind of felt like a bit of this like entitlement that like, because I'm here, I should be at the shows. And I hate to say it, but that's just not how it works. There's been times when, I've gone overseas and a brand has been like, oh, like there's a strong potential that you're going to get this show. And then I get there and I haven't gotten the show. That's just the reality. And so I feel like the Australian Fashion Council are trying to be more intentional of like who is actually attending the shows. Like how can they actually, help the brands rather than just like anyone going because they can buy a ticket. I don't think that's like a bad thing. If anything, it just reflects the overseas like model, like these brands put so much effort, and it's like, I just don't think anyone should go to a fashion show just because you can. I think it's fair for you to build that relationship with the brand and build that relationship with like, the PR agencies. I just like it. Yeah, I feel like I just saw so many people complaining and being like, oh, I didn't get an invite. And it's like, well, that's just kind of how it works. Like there's just been like, I keep saying this, but there's been I feel like people kind of see these like fashion shows and they see like influencers or girls going to these shows, and in some ways they kind of go, well, how come that person deserves it? But it's like, you don't know that person's story. You don't know all the things that they've like, done and sacrificed. And maybe sometimes that person's not in the fashion space. But I'm going to say, hold up a minute. You see overseas, they have like musicians and sports stars that go to fashion shows who aren't really like affiliated to like fashion, but they obviously have a platform and the brands like wants, more of an audience, and so naturally they invite those people. So I don't think it also has to be like all fashion people that go. I just think it needs to be an exchange. Anyways, I feel like this episode is like super choppy and I'm just like, brr. But my thoughts, I feel like those are like my general thoughts on Australia Fashion Week. I also think there is highly like this tall poppy syndrome. People talk about it all the time in Australia. I think we are like a very, small place in comparison to overseas. And definitely like I'm 100% more inspired when I go overseas and when I see the shows overseas, 1,000%. But also in saying that, brands and people in Australia are doing really cool things. Some more than others. There's definitely some I see and I don't really like resonate with. Or I kind of look at it and I go, oh, that's like very just like ready to wear commercial. Like, where is the creativity? 1,000%. So I'm not disputing that. But there definitely was like some really cool brands. And I'm going to go through my favorite shows. So I went to all the shows that I really loved. I went to Bear Park. And the show, first of all, the music, I don't know who was like singing about like they weren't singing, but just the track that they chose was just so beautiful, and it felt just very like grounding and like earthy and very like powerful. And then you have these like girls coming in these very sort of like minimal sort of like pieces that felt very like ethereal, but also like boss, and just like the shapes. I feel like I can't use my words right now. The shapes, the material, I felt like at Bear Park all the clothes were really made for the girls. Like it was for the girls. And almost every piece, like mostly the dresses I loved so much. I was like, I would wear that. Like that was amazing. Another standout show for me, which this one was quite interesting, they did it off-site, was Albus Lumen. I really loved the show. Like the level of detail that they had with like there was this white dress. I did like a recap on my Instagram, but there was this white dress and it had these like, I don't even, like kind of like circle like flower things like all over, but then the actual dress itself was like sheer. I thought that was so beautiful, and their first look was so cool. It was this like underwear set with like this really big hat that was like really, really cool. The only thing about Albus Lumen though, I feel like the show just had such an impression on me, and I was like, I've been literally thinking about it like ever since I went, and the venue was really cool. But just the other day, I feel like maybe I need to go back and like look at every look. But I just felt that I was just a bit surprised that like I felt like I didn't see any black models at the Albus Lumen show. Like that was the only thing that I was just like, yeah, like I was a bit surprised that was the only thing that I feel like for me personally that I was a bit like, and it was funny because I didn't even like fully realize, because I just was like, I was just looking at the clothes, and obviously I don't know, just for me being a woman of color, being a black girl in this industry, I don't know if I like missed something or so, or maybe I need to go back. But when I was looking at like my recap video thing, I was like, wait, like there was definitely like people of color, but I just didn't really see any black people. So that was the only thing that like I felt uncomfortable about. But the show itself and the pieces were really beautiful. But I just was like, I just was confused. I was like, wait, there's like there was like it. Yeah, like wait, I'm having a look. Like the styling was so amazing, but like, was that intentional? Like there was literally no black models, and and don't get me wrong, like all the girls look so beautiful, but like I just didn't. Yeah, I did not see any black girls. So that's my only thing about the Albus show. So that was disappointing. And it's interesting, obviously, me being a woman of color in this space, that a lot of the times you go to these things and you're literally like one of the only like black people in the room. But also that's just Australia for you, and I guess I've just gotten used to that. My standout show of Australia Fashion Week was drum roll, Nicole and Ford. That's how I feel. Okay, wait. People who are listening to this probably just heard silence, but if you're watching this video, I just screamed. Wait, I'm so excited to talk about this show because the energy, okay, first of all, they had it at this like bar venue in Newtown of Sydney. I cannot remember what it's called, but so there was like an upstairs part, and it felt really cool lining up, number one, which I feel like I never say, but it was really cool lining up because of the range of people in the line, and it felt like everyone was just so excited. So basically last year, like Nicole and Ford had a show, but I was not invited. Totally fine. I've never worked with the brand or really done anything with them. And I remember that like everyone just kept talking about the brand, and I was like, oh my gosh, amazing. And so this year I asked my manager, I was like, hey, could you please ask them and see if I can get an invite? And they were so lovely, and they were like, oh my God, yes, of course, come. And yeah, and I went and I had a really great seat. So I was like, ooh, I was really grateful about that. Thank you so much. But I felt like at this show that everyone who went really like dressed up, and there was just like this excitement, and it was in the night, and we were like standing there, and even it like kind of like started like raining a little bit, or actually no, it wasn't rain. It was like rain, in and out of rain, but like no one cared. Like everyone was just so excited. And then we got in and we were just kind of like, ooh, like this is what I mean by like an off-site show, because it was like, you know, not at Carriage Works, and it was like somewhere different, so it was like really cool. And we all like sat there, and there was like a stage and like a curtain that was down, and everyone just kind of knew that it was like on. And the very first look, it was Mana who had the very first look, and she had this like basket thing around her and like feathers coming out. And obviously, like Mana, always the model Mana, who has also been on the podcast before, she was the very last episode of season 2, just eats. It was like, you could not, like, all you could hear was people's breath. Like, everyone was just so, like, enamored by her. Like, all we could do was just look at her. And she just has this, like, amazing way of, like, really just like relishing in the energy, relishing in knowing that it's like, yes, I'm that girl, like, yes, I'm that bitch, like, and performing, but also just like so subtle and like powerful, and it was just so incredible. And I feel like that has been one of the only shows that I've gone to in my lifetime where people were like actually like reacting. Like every time a look would come out, everyone would be like, you know, it would be like, like everyone would be like, oh my God, like that, like that was literally the whole entire time. And I just loved like how much they like played with the materials, and also like the models. I feel like that's been like one of the only shows that I've ever really gone to, and I just visibly saw everyone just like mesmerized by like the performance and the strength of the models, and the pieces just like really spoke for itself. And I just loved how diverse, you know, the models were. So you know, there's this report that came out, I think from like Vogue Worldwide or something like that, or Vogue Runways, that apparently it was like 1.8% of like size inclusivity at Aus Fashion Week. And it's so interesting because like you definitely, like, I feel like very much so here when it comes to like having just all different kinds of bodies and different kinds of people, that a lot of the times it's like you'll literally just see like one girl who, you know, might be considered like plus size, but then even then it's like, don't just include someone just to like tick a box. Actually make sure that what you're putting them in like suits their body, and that they feel, you know, confident in it. Like give them as much attention as you're going to give like the girl who you're like, oh, that's the girl who's going to open the show. And when I saw the Nicole and Ford show, it was just done just with just so much grace, taste, power, that it really just put every other brand to shame. That it's like every single person who walked out of those curtains looked amazing, and it felt like obviously I'm only projecting, but it just felt like they all felt really good as well. You know, like I don't know, like, you know, just when someone walks out and you're like, oh, I can tell that you feel really hot. So yeah, those were my favorite shows. I think I don't even know if I'm fully going to be here next year for Aus Fashion Week, but wherever I go in the world, I want to always continue to support Australian. Wherever I go in the world, I always want to keep supporting Australian designers, because we have amazing, amazing designers here. And sometimes I kind of get a bit sad that like a lot of designers, when they do end up like kind of getting attraction like overseas, that they kind of like try to distance themselves from like coming from Australia unless like it suits them, you know. That I feel like when designers become really big, that I sometimes just wish that they would give back to like the industry that kind of like they started in. Obviously they don't owe anyone anything, but it just feels like everyone kind of leaves and then just starts showing in like Paris and you know, yeah, Paris and New York, which obviously that is always the goal, to be able to go there. But I hope that like wherever my career takes me, that I will always be supporting Australia. And there's definitely still so much more to be done here. And, you know, even with like inclusivity, for it to feel just more like it's coming from a place, like a sincere place, rather than ticking a box. I feel like some shows I went definitely felt like it was ticking boxes. And then even like Love the Albers show, but I just was like, where's the diversity? Hey, calling people out, but like that show was so beautiful, but I just was like that show stuck with me for so long. And I was like, wow, so beautiful, so beautiful. And then I kind of had this moment and I was a bit like, wow, I loved the show so much, but am I actually like invited to be a part of this brand and their vision? You know what I mean? If I'm like sitting there and I'm like the only black person, or one of the only like people of color, and then I look at the runway and I'm like, oh my God, love this. And then there's like literally no black people. Just because I felt like and they weren't part of the official calendar, but I just felt like every other show that I went to, there was like inclusivity. And it shouldn't even be inclusivity, because it's like all the black girls were eating. They ate down so hard. So I don't know, maybe I need to go back and have a look, but like I just was confused. I was hella confused. But yeah, that was my take on Australia Fashion Week. Thank you for listening. And next week, we're going to be having one of my beautiful friends, Caitlin, on the podcast on Monday. And when I say Monday, I mean Monday. Her episode will be out and we chat more about the industry. But yeah, I feel like this was a very rambly, jumbly sort of episode. Hope you were able to stay along. I'm trying to think if I have any other final thoughts. I think that just people need to remember that like Australia just doesn't have the budget as overseas. And I feel like, but also in saying that, just quickly, the week before the official Australia Fashion Week, there was an independent fashion like festival or so that was under the umbrella of Wings, and it was done by Alvi, who owns Speed. And I actually walked a show, one of my dear friends, his name's Joash, and I did a show for him for Joe Teo, and that was actually really cool because I feel like all the people who participated were very like young, forward thinking, and the set design and just like everything was executed so like well. I didn't attend any other shows apart from the show that I walked, but just like the images and like coverage that I saw, that seeing them just do their own thing and not waiting for the official Australia Fashion Week to kind of like have them on the calendar was also really inspiring. That I feel like a lot of the times the hesitation or even just brands being able to like participate is that it's really expensive, and seeing like young people just come together and like just do their own thing and like execute it and be so creative and just like eat down, that I was like, maybe it doesn't have to be so like, when it comes to the brand side, which I don't really know too much about it apart from what I hear here and there. It's like, it showed that it didn't have to be so like not accessible, because I feel like there are a lot of really cool designers in Australia, but the only thing is it's like, who's like, as a young designer having to pay like 40-50k onwards to have your show like in, you know, Australia Fashion Week is just not realistic. So I do feel that is also the other thing that is lacking, that there needs to be like more of a middle ground for these like smaller brands who have, you know, a good vision to be able to like participate. I did also, lastly, sorry, I thought this episode would literally be just like 20 minutes, but I did also go right on the last day. Vogue, it was like Vogue, Subi, and someone else did this thing called, it was like Vogue Vanguard also, and they basically platformed or like shone light to three designers, I think, three up and coming designers, and that was really cool, and it was like a group show. So I think there are obviously like initiatives like that, but obviously it's always like better to just be able to have like your own show, if that makes sense. But anyways, I'm gonna jump off now because I had a fun week. I feel like people were being like way too critical, and they also just need to calm down, you know, that it's fashion. Like, we're not saving lives. We love it so much, but we're not saving lives. And to also just be a bit kinder to each other. And I'm just like, there's just so much like cancel culture. It feels like no one can say anything right now, or people are like plotting for other people's like downfalls when it comes to Australia Fashion Week. Ready to be able to like judge what they're wearing, why they're going to certain shows, that it feels like it just creates this like really hostile environment. And I think that everyone just needs to like take a deep breath and be like, you are not the enemy, you know? None of us are the enemy. We just need to come together. Anyways, love you all. Bye.